Thank you all for taking the time today to join me. I do know things have been very chaotic lately, so we'll definitely get you out before that 30-minute time frame. And hopefully this is something, if you're not already familiar with, that could bring about some efficiency to some of the tasks that you do, mainly sending out communications within Marketing Cloud. So today's agenda, we will go ahead and, again, focusing very much on how to create a Salesforce send email and to get it out the door. And then even more, how to reuse that Salesforce send email, what truly brings about efficiency to your work. And so with that, we'll dive into pretty smoothly a bit of a comparison, really looking at those pros and cons of these two different approaches that ultimately meet the same goal. They get your email out the door of Marketing Cloud and into your recipients' inboxes. So just really want to reiterate that this will have zero change on your constituents' perspective or how they receive your emails. This is really just about how you get the email out the door. And so it comes down to your own preference. Then we should have a little bit of time. I have some advice on how to transition from using the guided send to the Salesforce send email component if after today's session it appeals to you. And so I am going to just quickly go through a guided send just to make sure we're all on the same page about what I'm referencing when I say that. And it also kind of plays a part into that comparison of that Salesforce send email. So just setting the stage a little bit before we really get into the meat of today, if you will. So I think most of us are familiar with logging into their account, and oftentimes you might be editing your email at this point in time, but presumably this is an email that's been tested, approved, and we definitely want to get it out the door. And so this is a point in time that you might start sending your communication. And so we'll go ahead and just go through that process where I would, up in this right-hand corner, go ahead and say save and send. So when I reference the guided send, this is exactly what I'm talking about, where you would see send email up here in the top left. And you're going to go through these 4 steps of defining properties, selecting your audience, configuring delivery, and that final review and send. No, we are all very familiar with this component here, those send classifications. In layman's terms, just who is this email coming from? And so some of us in our accounts, we might only have 1 or 2 send classification options, which can make things a little easier for you. But I've been seeing more and more accounts with many, many different send classifications that all might be used. So really an important part here to define who is this message coming from and making sure that it's the right person. In this example, we will say that this is the correct one, and I will go ahead and hit next, moving on to the portion where I would select my audience. And at this point, I am going to go ahead and move this group into my targeted audience from my report. So that is who I want to send it to. I know this, and I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And so with configuring that delivery, you can identify when you want this message to go out, either immediately or in the future. There is also an option in here, I think totally people are familiar with, the tracking folders, that for certain communications, you might want your tracking information to go to different folders. So that is a little thing there, but I won't dive too deep into that one for now. And so knowing I want this to go out immediately, I can go ahead and hit next, take a moment to review all of that information, ensure that it is correct, and I am ready to send, which I will go ahead and do now. Thumbs up if everyone feels comfortable with that process. Wonderful. Good. And so I in part asked that question because where we're going to get into with the Salesforce send email, it can add efficiency, especially for those people firing off emails all the time. But we've trained on this sometimes in the past, and there's been cases where this can cause confusion if you're not already familiar with the guided send process. So just something to be aware about that I've recognized in that learning curve. But that being said, if it is something that excites you today and there's confusion around it, of course, we have your eComm specialist there for a reason to help you and make that transition. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of take a step back for a moment. And so while many of us do that guided send, what you might not be aware of is that on the back end, a Salesforce send email was actually created. Every single guided send that you ever do actually has a Salesforce send email on the back end of it. And so what that means when I say that is, if you were to navigate in your account from interactions down to this Salesforce send email, I am going to expect to see the send that I just created. And this is a con of that guided send process. It's actually this one right up here. And we can see that I just created it when I modified it. And it's got this really terrible name. But when you go ahead and open it up, I need to scroll to the top a little bit. This is pulling in all the same information that we pulled in our guided send. It just doesn't look quite as pretty. So that is another reason why some people gravitate away from this. They just like the look of the other interface, which is perfectly fine. For me, I more focus on function and efficiency, which is why I'm perfectly fine with this less attractive interface, if you will. So there is a name of this Salesforce send, and it was named by the system because we went through that guided send process. And then it's also pulling in our emails. This is just a look at all of our content builder emails, that same folder structure that you set up. That's the email that I sent out the door. As you scroll down into the send management area, we can see the send classification. Again, we saw that I just picked CU News. Yep, that's been added in there. We also know the recipients that I chose. That's already been put in there. So bear with me a moment, and again, why this topic is a little confusing. While this created this on the Salesforce send, right? I did the guided send, it created this on the back end. There is a function here where you can also create these from scratch. So I'm going to name this my CVEN alert. Where are we in? It's taking its sweet time, apparently. So let's go say I can pull my email. This is taking a chunk of time. I'm just going to pick a random email. I can go ahead and select my send classification, and I can edit my recipients. So still have access to all of your reports as well as your data extensions if that is what you are sending from. I'm just going to go grab a report, send this into my targeted area. And I will hit save on that. And so I've got all my most important pieces married together right now. And just one more reiterating right now, you can have the best email in the world. And right, if you mess up either who this is coming from or who this is going to, the audience, that's kind of all that work for nothing in a sense. Really messing up that delivery. And so by way of kind of approaching it this way, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Say this email is ready to go. You would be ready to send this communication. So let's go ahead. I will say send. And at this point, I have the option to, just like I did in the guided send, to determine, do I want it to go out immediately or do I want it to go out in the future? I'll go ahead and say right now, and I'll certify that, and I want it to go out right now, which is perfectly fine. So at this point, I have gone through the guided send, got this message out the door, and then I've also just created a Salesforce send from scratch and also sent it and got it out the door. Two of the exact same end results. So hopefully you've been able to bear with me thus far. Where the true efficiency comes out is the next time that you want to send this communication. That instead of that stressful moment of, oh, it's been a month, now I need to go send the October newsletter. What audience was I sending to? What was my from information? I don't remember. These Salesforce send emails, you can go back to. You can modify just the content from it, and you can go ahead and send it again. And so let me actually do that. My example here was, oh, October came around. All I would do instead of going through the guided send wizard is pop into this particular Salesforce send email and change the email. Go grab my new content from the next month that perhaps I've been working on. And that way you don't have to think about what the send classification is. You don't have to think about who the audience is. And these most important pieces of marrying together right at the end, you don't really have to think about that. I know I sent it out correctly last time, so why even think about these pieces? So after I select my new content that has been finalized, right? Maybe this is my October newsletter. Just change the name, select my new content, and hit save. I can pop back in here and go ahead and hit send on this October version of this message. So again, when we're looking at this from the guided send process, there's a folder structure, which I have not even looked at yet. We can kind of disregard that one for a moment. But looking at the name of that email send, when you go through that guided send process, right, it's going to name it something like guided send. It's really gross. It's not readable. You can't do a lot with that. So from this perspective, I find it a bit annoying. But that content, right, once it's finalized, that's when you go ahead and start sending. That's the start of the process. But in order to get the right from information, you need to know what it is and you need to select it at that moment in time. Of course, for your send time, that's just when you're sending, if it's scheduled in the future or sending immediately, you will need to determine that every single time. And same goes for that audience. You're going to need to identify, is it this report, this data extension, these 10 data extensions, whatever that audience is, you're going to need to pull them in at that moment in time. And same goes for the tracking folder that I quickly touched on. But on the flip side, when we're looking at that Salesforce send email, sorry, I'm going to bypass the folder structure for a moment as well. The name that you provide on that email send, you can name it yourself. And that's what can make it so valuable in just naming it something like connections, right? You all receive CU connections every single Thursday, and this is exactly how we do it. We just name it with the date. This piece is exactly as the guided send process works, that content is going to need to be finalized, and you are going to need to select it every time you create this or you modify it. But the from information, that's again where we get our efficiency. The from information we used last time is always going to be the same from information, so it remains selected. One less thing that you need to think about. The send time, and I have it bolded there as well, this does behave the same as the guided send wizard. You're going to need to figure out when you're sending it at the moment of send. But the audience, again, where it really does bring about efficiency for you. The same audience remains selected all the time. And so some of these things might not seem like a big deal to some of you. And maybe one, your memory is better than mine. Maybe you send one communication and it's always the exact same from information and the exact same audience. And you really only have one choice in there. But for myself, sending out numerous communications that all vary heavily from one another relieves a lot of stress for me not having to remember this again, final piece of putting the bow on this item before it gets out the door. I do want to reiterate as well that, and I should send out this link actually. I have it here. I know I went through that Salesforce send email process pretty quickly, but we do have a wiki out there. If you, where are you? This guy that I will go ahead and share through chat right now as well. If you want to look at that process. And I do want to go through one thing that is just very, very important. I have trained somebody on this in the past, and then they went and used it, and it kind of resulted in an error. So I just want to mention this as it might trip you up. So let's say, as I've just gone ahead and done, or actually, I guess I'll do this once more. I'm going to open up this October CVent alert and go to I'm just going to pick a random email for now. So let's say it's November. I'm ready to send out my November version. So I went and selected my, what I'll claim is my November content, this alumni survey. And I'm going to go ahead and change the name to November. And then I'm going to hit save. Okay, I'm getting ready to send, and my boss calls me. It's like, oh, Rod, we just realized that the email you're about to send, I know we all approved it, but there's a broken link in it. We got to get it fixed. So okay, thank you for telling me before I went and sent it. And let's go edit this content. So we had said it was this guy. We're going to go edit it, and turns out, oh, this link was broken, or this was a typo, let's say. And we realized that there was a typo in the subject line. Or maybe we want this $20 gift card to be further up here. Okay, awesome. We dodged a bullet. This is exactly how we want it to be. And I'm going to go hit save. So what I think some users have done in the past is at that moment then said, okay, well, I've already attached that content to this email. It's ready to go. So I'll hop in here and I'll go ahead and hit send. Well, if you look at this pre-header, didn't I just edit this and save it? That I was going to start it with the $20. You might think, oh, did I not save that email? You saved the email, but you need to pick up this content and save it when it is finalized. There cannot be changes after that. So in this case where, oh no, we just made a change to that email, I need to click back into this email send. And even though it's the exact same email content, I need to reselect it. And you might have seen that when I did that, it brought in my most recent email. So you need to select it and you need to hit save in order to get the most recent content to be sent. Yep, reiterate, we can see that. It's got my newest version in here. Does that piece make sense as far as your email content needs to be selected here and saved? Okay. So as far as next steps, I do think that like transitioning from the guided send process to this email send is kind of made easier because this Salesforce send email is being created on the back end. So like I did, we were absolutely, this was the one that I set up as a guided send. If you've sent one recently and you're like, you know what, I send that message every week and it stresses me out every week trying to marry these pieces together, you can use this previous guided send. You don't need to create one from scratch. You can really just go ahead and rename it as you wish. Alrighty. You will notice kind of the best practice that we've taken in our account. Do go ahead and add the month and the year in there so that we can go ahead and modify that really easily, but always says eComm newsletter. I know I mentioned connections as one that we use this for as well with our weekly send. So very, very similar. And every email we send really, we leverage a Salesforce send email directly. All righty. I think we've got 3 minutes left. If we do have questions, I sent out this Salesforce send email wiki as well, if you do want to start exploring that. And I also mentioned at the beginning that if like with any change, we want to make sure you're doing it correctly. So if taking a moment with me to go through that process, you're welcome to reach out to me as well as your eComm specialist. They are very familiar with this as well.